Summer is undoubtedly the finest season, a sentiment I firmly uphold. My affection for summer does not stem from social gatherings or alcohol, as one might assume. Rather, it is rooted in my appreciation for nature, the warmth of the weather, and the great outdoors, which I believe are inherently linked. I assure you that when the heat arrives, I find myself outdoors far more often than indoors. A few summers ago, on a warm night in mid-June, an event unfolded that remains vivid in my memory. At that time, I was either 17 or 18 years old. For context, there exists a vast nature preserve near my residence, and when I say vast, I refer to its nearly 1,000 acres of land. Even now, I am certain there are areas within it that I have yet to explore. Two friends and I decided to spend a night camping in those woods. Although camping there was technically prohibited and nearly illegal, we believed the dense forest would shield us from detection. We simply need to venture as far into the wilderness as we can. Chuck was the camping enthusiast among us. He had a passion for dressing up as a Boy Scout and was likely familiar with nearly 100 different knots. Our other companion, Jackson, was responsible for providing the beverages. His discontent was evident if we were not under the influence. That was simply the nature of our outings with Jackson. I recall the sensation of the gentle summer breeze caressing my hair as the three of us loaded our gear into Jackson's vehicle. The weather was perfect, not too cold and not too warm. After a few beers, we found ourselves hauling camping supplies through the woods around 11:30 p.m. I must admit, I could feel the effects of the alcohol as we made our way forward. Chuck always brought along a heavy-duty flashlight, which alleviated some of the concerns regarding the darkness of the forest. However, despite my fondness for the outdoors, navigating through dense woods at that hour felt somewhat unsettling, even with Chuck's flashlight illuminating our path. After nearly 30 minutes of continuous walking, the three of us stumbled upon a small, flat clearing that served as an ideal location for setting up camp. Following Chuck's guidance, we pitched our tent and arranged our chairs. The next task was to start a fire, and once again, Chuck took the initiative. Within a few minutes, we had a respectable fire crackling. Jackson then reached into his bag and handed me another drink before retrieving his JBL speaker to play some music. The atmosphere was perfect, and we spent the next couple of hours engaged in conversation and enjoying our drinks. By that time, we were all quite inebriated, and I sensed that the others were ready to call it a night. Jackson lowered the volume of the music and began to gather the empty beer cans. Suddenly, a piercing whistle shattered the tranquility. I nearly leaped from my seat, transitioning from a state of drunkenness to heightened alertness in an instant. The whistle was unnaturally loud, yet seemed to come from a distance. Jackson promptly turned off the speaker, and the three of us exchanged worried glances, our hearts racing. We remained frozen in place, straining to listen to our surroundings, but all was silent. The atmosphere had taken on a notably quieter tone than it had upon our arrival, almost eerily so, devoid of the usual sounds of the woods that one typically expects. I seized the moment to replay the memory of the whistle in my mind. It was unmistakably not the sound of any animal. The best comparison I could make was to a standard whistle one might hear at a baseball game. Chuck eventually broke the stillness, softly suggesting that we should pack up and leave. Jackson and I, however, were opposed to this idea, as it posed the risk of encountering the source of that unsettling noise, a prospect that filled me with dread. It was now past 3 a.m., and an encounter at such an hour could only lead to trouble. Chuck speculated that the entity responsible for the sound was likely aware of our presence, a thought that sent chills down my spine. I found myself at a crossroads. On one hand, remaining in place contradicted every survival instinct I possessed, while on the other, leaving at this hour seemed equally unwise. Ultimately, we reached a consensus to wait it out. I moved to extinguish the fire, but Chuck advised against it, arguing that a fire would deter any potentially dangerous animals. It was then that the full weight of our predicament hit me. We were miles from civilization, it was 3 a.m., and an unknown presence lurked in the darkness. After about 10 minutes of silence, we resumed our conversation, albeit in hushed tones and without music. None of us felt secure enough to sleep just yet. Suddenly, from the corner of my eye, I noticed something small darting through the darkness over Jackson's shoulder, landing directly in the fire. A firecracker erupted, and I screamed in terror as it ignited in the flames. Chuck swore loudly, leaping from his chair and dashing into the darkness. Jackson and I hurried to follow, abandoning all our belongings. We soon caught up with Chuck, whose flashlight flickered erratically through the woods as he ran in a panic. We continued until exhaustion overtook us and Jackson collapsed, retching. Chuck turned off the flashlight, and the three of us stood there, breathless, trying to ascertain if we were being pursued. To my astonishment, it appeared that no one was following us. Despite this, I had never felt such fear. I could not comprehend why someone would do such a thing. We needed to devise a plan. Jackson suggested we find our way out of the woods and never return, but Chuck hesitated to abandon his camping equipment. He also reminded us that the fire was still burning. I was taken aback. How could he be worried about forest fires after the incident we had just experienced? Eventually, I concurred with Chuck that we should at least check on the campsite, as no one had actually chased us. There was a slim chance that the individual who threw the firecracker was merely playing a cruel joke. Chuck, being an expert navigator, successfully retraced our steps. As we quietly approached, I could discern the glow of the fire. However, before I could get any closer, Jackson halted me with a hand and pointed, his face a mask of horror. I strained to see what lay ahead, and what I beheld was perhaps the most frightening sight I had ever encountered. 3 figures sat motionless in our chairs, resembling statues. The one whose face was visible appeared lifeless, with his mouth agape. Fear gripped me, and I hesitated to move. What were they doing? I wondered, realizing they were not even speaking. This was far from normal. The 3 of us observed for a few moments longer before deciding to retreat. We began to leave, but Jackson's foot struck a rock, prompting him to curse in frustration. Within moments, the fire's glow suddenly extinguished, as if shrouded by an unseen force. The change was alarmingly swift. Without hesitation, we sprinted away from the location, but this time, we could hear the sound of footsteps crashing behind us. We did not pause. We dashed out of the woods and made our way to Jackson's car. By some stroke of luck, we were not pursued. During the drive back, silence enveloped us, each of us lost in our own thoughts. The following day, Chuck insisted on returning to the site in daylight to retrieve his belongings. Jackson was reluctant, but I agreed to accompany Chuck. After some searching, we located the site, which appeared largely undisturbed until we approached and detected a foul odor emanating from Chuck's tent. He unzipped it, revealing a decaying rat inside, which was utterly revolting. Taking the hint, I decided not to return to that preserve again. This ongoing situation began approximately a month ago. However, I would like to provide some background first. I am 24 years old and reside with my parents. My family has never been financially stable, and nearly all of my earnings are directed towards supporting the household. My relationship with my parents is strained, as we often engage in arguments. When I am not working or socializing with friends, I tend to keep to myself. I do not wish to present a sob story, but my upbringing has been challenging. Fitness has consistently served as my primary means of escape, allowing me to alleviate personal stress while also providing a valid reason to leave the house. There is a park located about a 10-minute drive from my residence, which features a workout facility equipped with bars for pull-ups, dips, and various calisthenic exercises. During the summer months, I prefer to visit this park for my workouts, as the natural surroundings help to soothe my mind. I typically go at night, as the park becomes quite crowded during the day. One evening, while my parents were in the midst of an argument, I decided to leave the house to exercise. It was an exceptionally warm summer night, likely around 85 degrees. I recall inhaling the humid air as I walked from my front door to the old white Corolla parked in our driveway. I started the aging engine and rolled down the windows, allowing the warm summer breeze to flow through my hair. Upon arriving at the park, I exited my vehicle to find that I was the only car in the lot. It was around 10 or 11 p.m., and the park was entirely deserted at that hour. The picturesque landscape, combined with the warm, humid air, fosters a calming ambience, which is yet another reason for my fondness for this park. Perched atop a hill, it offers a view of the downtown area of my city, consistently evoking pleasant and nostalgic feelings during my evenings. On this occasion, I began a set on the pull-up bar. I do not typically count my repetitions. Instead, I push myself to the point of failure, take a brief respite, and then repeat the process a few more times. During one of my breaks, as I was loosening my arms in preparation to resume my workout, an inexplicable sensation washed over me, compelling me to glance over my shoulder. To my surprise, a tall, disheveled man stood merely a foot away from me. Startled, I let out a scream and instinctively jumped back several feet. He responded with a loud, hearty laugh and apologized, indicating that he had not intended to frighten me. His appearance and behavior were notably eccentric. It was evident that he was not entirely well. I inquired about his proximity, to which he replied that he lived nearby. He mentioned that he often observed me exercising and requested if I could teach him. As someone who generally avoids confrontation, especially in such moments, I preferred solitude. I awkwardly yet courteously informed him that I intended to continue with my pull-ups and then depart. I returned to the bar to complete my set. His words lingered in my thoughts. He often observed me from a distance. I could feel the intensity of his gaze searing into the back of my neck. Despite the growing discomfort he caused me, I remained non-confrontational and was uncertain how to address the situation. Then, an unsettling incident occurred just as I was concluding my set. I heard him whisper my full name, and an icy chill coursed through my veins. Startled, I leaped off the bar and cautiously retreated, stammering a hesitant, "What?" He did not reply but continued to fixate on me with a wild, unsettling grin. The strangeness of the moment made me question my senses. A deep sense of foreboding settled in my stomach, signaling that something ominous was imminent. Without uttering another word, I resolved to hastily return to my car and depart. I could feel his eyes on me as I made my exit, but fortunately, he did not pursue me. Before leaving the park, I cast one final glance back and noticed him hanging from the bar, attempting to perform a pull-up. I observed as he grasped the bar, struggled to lift himself, and then tried again in the very position I had occupied moments earlier. I quickly exited the park without looking back. Throughout the drive home, I found myself questioning whether he had truly called my name or if I had merely imagined it. I endeavored to dismiss the incident from my mind, and eventually, I succeeded. The following morning, I awoke early to prepare for work in construction, ensuring I was up before my parents. I was the first to notice an unmarked envelope resting at my front door, addressed to me. I picked up the envelope, intending to read its contents whenever I had a moment. It was another oppressively hot summer day, and I decided to take my lunch break early to escape the heat. While seated in my car, enjoying my pre-prepared sandwich, I chose to open the envelope. I had no clear expectations, but I certainly never anticipated discovering 10 printed photographs of myself. Each image had been taken without my knowledge. One captured me in my car, another at my workplace, and yet another while I was exercising in the park. The memory of the unsettling man from the previous night flooded back, and a wave of nausea washed over me. In disbelief, I continued to flip through the remaining photos. One depicted my house, and the most disturbing of all was a picture of me sleeping, taken from outside my window. I nearly choked on my food as tears streamed down my face, overwhelmed by a sense of vulnerability. I informed my boss that a serious matter had arisen and left work immediately. Although he was displeased, I was beyond caring. I took a photograph of the images and drove straight to the police station, where I presented the photos and recounted my encounter at the park. I provided a description of the man, and they assured me they would investigate. I also shared the incident with my parents, and for the first time in a long while, I received some sympathy from them. However, unsettling events continued to unfold. A few nights later, around 3 a.m., I was awakened by knocking at the door. I refrained from answering, fearing the worst. On another occasion, I discovered a sticky note affixed to my car window, adorned with a heart drawn in Sharpie. I returned to the police to report this new development, and they informed me that they would initiate a stalking investigation. I have not yet received a response from them. I believe it is challenging to establish a case without solid evidence. This incident occurred approximately a month ago, and I have remained vigilant since then. My parents are in the process of searching for a new home, which is particularly difficult considering our financial circumstances. I will provide updates if there are any developments. In the meantime, I will continue to remain alert. Last summer, when I was 22 years old, I found myself in a situation that was quite unexpected. At that time, I was not particularly outgoing. Any social engagement I participated in was typically due to the influence of my less-than-responsible friends who managed to coax me out of my home. This occasion was no different. My friend Philip had invited me to a house party around 8 p.m. It was a spontaneous invitation, and since I had no other plans, I reluctantly agreed to accompany him. I was aware that he would tease me if I declined. However, I must admit that the prospect of attending a party, even with unfamiliar faces, seemed more enticing than spending the evening alone. Philip lived a few towns away, so it was more practical for us to drive separately rather than together. He provided me with the address, and I set off. However, the moment I turned onto the street, Philip decided to cancel at the last minute. While I understood his reasons, I was incredibly frustrated. I felt foolish standing outside a stranger's house, but I was determined not to let the night go to waste. After all, I had driven all this way, so I resolved to go inside. I approached the front steps and knocked on the door. The host, Randy, welcomed me with warmth and friendliness, immediately making a positive impression. He introduced me to others, and to my surprise, the atmosphere was far less awkward than I had expected. The guests were genuinely friendly, despite my unfamiliarity with them, and I even noticed a few girls who caught my interest. I decided to embrace the evening and indulge in the drinks. As the night progressed, the party continued to thrive, but I may have overindulged in alcohol. At one point, I felt so nauseous and dizzy that I realized I needed to take a break. It must have been nearly 2 a.m. at that time when I ascended the stairs in search of a bathroom, only to find all of them occupied. The house was surprisingly large. Perhaps it was the influence of the alcohol, but I was genuinely losing my way as I navigated the labyrinth of hallways on the upper level. Upon reaching the top floor, I discovered a door that led to what appeared to be an attic or storage area. In dire need of some privacy, I deemed it a suitable spot to collect myself. I fumbled around in the dark for a light switch, but to my dismay, there was none. This was undoubtedly an attic, as dust was prevalent throughout the space. I noticed a window in the far corner, which I opened to let the cool night air envelop me. For a brief moment, I contemplated the possibility of being sick onto the roof, but the refreshing breeze alleviated my nausea, prompting me to lean my head out of the window. The darkness outside, coupled with the serene silence, provided a welcome contrast to the raucous atmosphere below. Sometimes, all one requires to regain composure is a gentle breeze and a moment of tranquility. Just as I was about to close the window and return inside, I heard a faint sound, footsteps on the roof shingles. This was perplexing. Was I losing my sanity? Driven by curiosity, I decided to climb out onto the roof. In all sincerity, I likely would not have taken such action had I been sober. Gradually, I rose to my feet and surveyed my surroundings in the moonlight, where I encountered a chilling sight. 2 masked individuals with bags emerging from a nearby window. It became clear to me that Ree's house was under siege. Panic set in. Should I shout or confront them? A more urgent thought crossed my mind. What if they were armed? In my clumsy state of disbelief, I lost my footing and scuffed a shingle, producing a loud noise. One of the intruders heard it and turned his head in my direction. Our eyes met for a fleeting moment, and I froze. He nudged his accomplice, and they swiftly began to navigate the roof. A surge of adrenaline coursed through me. I could not allow them to escape. Randy had shown me such kindness, and I felt a strong sense of loyalty. I resolved to take action. Quietly, I trailed the burglars across the roof, maintaining a safe distance. They moved toward a sloped section for an easier getaway. As they descended, I attempted to call 911, but in my inebriated state, I fumbled and dropped my phone. The device clattered loudly, prompting one of the burglars to exclaim, "Who's there?" My heart raced as I ducked and scanned my surroundings, spotting a loose shingle. Without a second thought, I seized it and threw it at them. Although it missed, the noise startled one burglar, causing him to lose his balance and tumble down the roof, crashing into the gutter before hitting the ground. The other burglar, now in a state of panic, leaped to a nearby tree and scrambled down. I rushed to the edge of the roof and saw the fallen burglar groaning on the ground. I needed to alert others, and as I turned to head back, I heard sirens. Someone else must have contacted the police. I retraced my steps back into the attic room and descended the stairs, striving to maintain a composed demeanor. The party continued unabated, unaware of the turmoil occurring outside. I located Randy, who was engaged in laughter and conversation with the guests. "Randy, you must call the police. There has been a robbery." I witnessed the burglar on the roof. I informed him. Randy's expression shifted from amusement to astonishment. "Are you serious?" he asked, rushing to make the call. I recounted the events, and the atmosphere of the party transitioned from festive to tense. It turned out that one of Randy's neighbors had fortuitously contacted the police to report a noise complaint, an ironic stroke of luck. When the authorities arrived, I detailed my account, leading them to the injured burglar. The man was apprehended, but his accomplice had escaped. The party concluded abruptly, with guests dispersing and the lights being turned on. I endeavored to appear sober, yet I still found myself slightly unsteady despite the chaos. Randy expressed his gratitude profusely, still in disbelief. As for me, I was simply relieved to have been of assistance, despite the strange and frightening circumstances. In retrospect, I remain puzzled as to why the burglars would target a house hosting a party, but perhaps they had prior knowledge of the residents and assumed no one would be upstairs. I thought that would be the conclusion of the story, but several months later, I received quite the update. One evening, while playing video games at Philip's house, he received a call from Randy inviting us over for a few beers. Until that moment, I had not realized how close the two of them had become. Upon arriving at Randy's house, the first thing that struck me was the front door and all the windows, which appeared entirely different. Had I misremembered his house? I could have sworn the windows and front door were white, yet they were now gray and appeared significantly more robust. Randy welcomed us inside, and we proceeded to his basement. We opened a few beers and began a game of pool. To my astonishment, he recognized me from the party and expressed his gratitude once more for my assistance. However, what he shared with us was quite astonishing. It turned out that the burglar apprehended that night refused to provide information about his accomplice and is now serving a lengthy prison sentence. Unfortunately, the police have been unable to gather any leads to apprehend the other individual. Randy informed us that not even a week after the incident, his family began receiving threatening letters from an unidentified sender, some of which contained photographs of Randy and his family members. Naturally, they reported these incidents, but the police had no substantial leads. A month later, Randy's mother observed a suspicious vehicle circling their home around 1 a.m., and a few days afterward, Randy's father reported that items in their backyard had been disturbed and rearranged. In response, Randy's father, Ed, enhanced their home security and took measures to replace and reinforce all their doors and windows. I was taken aback to learn that this issue was still ongoing for Randy, and I had no idea how serious such a situation could become. With summer approaching, I anticipate having another update when I see Randy again. Thanks for joining me on this journey through the strange and unexpected. If you enjoyed the story, hit that like button, share with fellow curious minds, and don't forget to subscribe for more. Until next time, stay curious, stay intrigued,